Collin, rivoluzione delle nanotecnologie. Prego.
Buongiorno. It's a pleasure to be here in Milan. Thank you for having me, and thank you for allowing me to speak in English. I promise to do something that is very difficult for me, and that is to speak slowly. So bear with me. Do this if I'm speaking a little too fast. I'm talking to you, John Barrett. Okay, so my goals today, there's two really. The first is to give you a kind of a big picture overview of what nanotechnology is. And the second is to give you a few things to think about when you leave here, some trends to follow and some opportunities to look for down the road. Okay, so we're all familiar with this Clark Kent, right? It's this idea of this ordinary, everyday man who transforms into this super being simply by stepping into a phone booth and taking his clothes off. Well, nanotechnology is a lot like Clark Kent, but there's a couple of important differences. One, everyday, ordinary materials become super materials, but they do so by shrinking. And when they become extremely small, they transform into these super materials. The second difference between nanotechnology and Clark Kent is fictional, and nanotechnology is very real. Somewhat early, but very real. So what do we mean by extremely small? So in commercially speaking, 1 nanometer is here. So these are increments of 10. So this is 1 nanometer. It's about the size of a glucose molecule. You get up to about 10 nanometers, and you have an antibody. 100 nanometers is a virus. About 1,000 nanometers, which is also called a micron, is about the size of a bacteria. Commercially speaking, we're going from about the size of a glucose particle to maybe 3 times the size of a bacteria. Okay, and so why is this important? Well, there's 2 real reasons for it. Number one, when materials get very small, their electrostatic forces, which are tiny atomic forces, which are insignificant when they're large, can become really important. And we'll see some examples. And keep in mind, all things equal, the smaller they become, the stronger these forces become. Second thing is that the surface areas to volume ratios become huge. They go off the charts. And surfaces are extremely important because almost all reactions take place on surfaces. So if you can control that and expose more surface, you can make amazing things happen. And it impacts a range of properties. So it's everything from mechanical to biological to chemical, thermal properties, optical properties, and so on. Okay, so nature provides us some really interesting things to look at. There's this concept called biomimetics, which means literally mimicking nature or copying, mimicking biology or copying nature. And we find that in the animal world, lots of animals and plants have nano hairs or fibers on their body. And these are often patterned. And Darwin, or evolution, teaches us that if they're there like that, there's a reason for it. And they can do some amazing things, and we're going to see some examples of that here. And there's huge promise if you can synthesize it, if you can do it synthetically, what animals are already doing in plants. How am I doing on the speed? Okay? Good. So this is a very interesting animal here. It's called the Saharan silver ant. And this animal lives on the floor of the desert, and when it's extremely hot, say 150 degrees Fahrenheit, 70 degrees C or something, I can't translate off the top of my head, it can thrive and actually forage while all the other animals are either dying on the surface or buried into the sand to survive. And the reason it can do that, if you look here, it has these hairs, and when you magnify these are under an electron microscope. These are around about a micron in diameter, 1,000 nanometers. They actually affect light, and they reflect light extremely well, so along with the light, it reflects the heat, so they don't get warmed up to begin with. And the second thing is they radiate heat very well, so they cool very efficiently. It's a game changer for that animal. So what does that teach us about cleaning? Well, this shows that, that nano can impact optical properties. There's a company in New York City called Purity that takes advantage of a kind of a related property of that. And what they do is they dissolve titanium dioxide nanoparticles in water. They spray that onto surfaces. And when it dries, it leaves behind this invisible, very thin layer of these particles. And what they do is they actually interact with sunlight, and they take the energy from sunlight, and they catalyze that to break water molecules that are in the atmosphere, just in the humidity. And they break that into these radicals that actually clean the air. So they keep the surfaces clean longer, and they literally clean the air around them. And because these are catalysts, they don't get used up in the reaction, so they can last a very long time. And so they use it in different ways. They have a window cleaner, so you clean your window, and it actually, for the next couple of months, keeps the air quality in your home better. They also spray it on windows, on buildings, et cetera. Okay, so many of you may be familiar with this animal, the gecko. The gecko has the ability to walk up walls and even crawl across ceilings. And you might think that maybe it can do that because it has adhesive on the ends of its little feet, or maybe it has suction cups or something. But no, actually the reason is it has nanofibers on the end. Oops, let's go back. Here's a laser. So these are actually, they look like little stalks of celery, and they even get thinner at the very end, and these are maybe 50 nanometers. And they create these instantaneous electrostatic forces, what we talked about earlier, and they make an instantaneous attraction with the wall. And collectively over millions or hundreds of millions of fibers, it's greater than gravity. It allows this animal to walk up walls. So why is this relevant to cleaning? Well, if you think about a cleaning cloth, when it comes to conventional cleaning where you're using a chemical and a wet cloth to wipe it away, it probably isn't relevant. But other types of cleaning, they're more mechanical cleaning like you see with microfiber cloths. They're actually, the fibers themselves have these electrostatic forces that we talked about, and they attract the dirt particles. And again, the smaller these fibers are, the better job they do of doing that. And if they do a better job of doing that, it means you can do the same amount of cleaning with less swipes, which means less labor, perhaps less chemicals, maybe better for the environment, lower cost. I should point out, though, that to my knowledge, while there are a lot of products that call themselves nano in the marketplace, there are no true nanofiber cloths yet. They're actually microfiber. But they will happen, and you'll see a step change similar to what you saw when microfibers came on. You'll see when true nanofibers are in the market. It's also relevant to filtration. So we think of filtration as acting like a sieve. And a sieve where larger particles get caught, they can't pass through the holes in the filter, smaller particles pass through. But very often we're filtering mixes that have particles that are smaller than those openings, or may not be the smallest particles in the mix. So how does that work? Well, it turns out that the filter itself, the fibers that make up the filter, actually attract the particles to it. So if you've got the particles coming down, it's going to pass through the hole. It's actually drawn to the filter material. And the smaller the fibers, the greater the electrostatic forces that do the drawing, and it pulls it more strongly to that. So all things equal, the stronger these electrostatic forces, which you get by making the fibers smaller and smaller, allows you to do a better job of, you're going to filter a larger percentage of the particles that you want out. You're going to be able to pass the stream through more quickly. You're going to be able to have less loading, less back pressure, and so on. So it benefits the filter in every way. Here's an example. These are actually in the marketplace today. And this is a company called Next Nano. You can see that it's kind of a matte, kind of random spacing here. And they're only used in niche applications because it's expensive and they work well, but the properties are going to get better. And when you can bring the cost down and you can make the properties even better, you're going to see a greater proliferation of this. Which brings me to talking about my company a little bit here, my company, Ultra Small Fibers. We have, as far as I know, the unique ability to emboss nanofiber textures onto thin film plastic. So probably best seen here on this right-hand picture. This here is the cut surface of a film. It's about 20 microns thick. And on top here, these are nanofibers that we literally emboss into the surface of it. Over here is an area of the top surface of the film where there isn't any of that. And looking here from the side, here's the thickness of the film. And then you see it looks like little hairs on top, but that's actually a nanofiber technology. We can do that in sheets and ultimately roll to roll. And once it's in roll form, you can do all the things that people do to rolls of plastic. You can cut it, dope it, coat it, et cetera. And you can even make films out of it. As you see here, this is actually what we call a three-dimensional film. What looks like hairs there are actually nanofibers. So you can have that nano behavior, and you can make woven materials out of it, whether it be a filter or textiles and the like. So this is a larger magnification view of what we can do. So over here, these are the larger ones. These are a few thousand nanometers. You see they look like posts. They have a very regular pattern, and we can control that pattern with very high precision, and we can control the diameters very much. In the middle here, these are probably a fifth the size of those. Looks like kind of blades of grass. They almost can't, they sway a little under their own weight. And over here, we're down to about a tenth that size, maybe 50 nanometers, and they're actually kind of wispy and curl back on themselves. Each of those has a different set of properties which are applicable in different applications. And we can do anything from that to that to that, and anything in between. So the promise here is that if you can go from conventional nanofibers to this approach, the nanoforest, you can actually make it a lot cheaper to make because it's roll to roll. And you can make the electrostatic forces even greater, which gives you the benefits that we talked about before. Some of you may be now moving to the plant world. Some of you may be familiar with this plant called the lotus plant and the lotus effect, which actually this plant can clean itself. And the way that it does that, probably no surprise right now, is it has a nanotexture on the leaves. So this is a magnification of the leaves. And these actually interact with water, and they affect water's ability to either bead up or spread out. It's like when you wax your car. When the car is unwaxed, the water wants to spread. When it's waxed, the water hates the wax, and it tries to minimize itself, and it beads up. In the case of the lotus plant, these, it's water droplets from rain or dew actually slide across instead of wetting and spreading, they slide across, and as they slide, they pick up dirt and debris, and they slide off, they clean the leaf. So with our ability to put the nanotextures on, we can actually simulate that. So this here on the left it's a particular type of plastic called polycaprolactone with no texture at all, so it's just the regular plastic surface. You can see the water kind of likes to bead up. But when we add the right kind of texture onto it, it becomes super hydrophobic. It really hates water and becomes like a sphere, like the lotus plant did. So there's applications for self-cleaning, but also things like de-icing and the like by making it hate water so much. And interestingly enough, we can have the opposite effect on oils. So again, this is non-textured, just a regular film. And it kind of likes the oil. It has a little bit of a cap there, but it's a little bit spread. But when you put the right texture on it, it completely spreads out on that surface. If you could run the video, I've got there's some beautiful videos we've been watching today, like Spectacular. This is not one of them, but I think it's kind of funny. You'll hear the voice of my partners talking about it.
There's the ocean. Okay, now we have a big oil spill.
Oh no.
Oh my God, what are we gonna do?
All that wildlife is gone.
I know, this is terrible.
Yeah, we have to sue this BP.
And Shell.
Quick.
And Mobil.
But Chevron has made a new oil cleaning robot that goes over.
Ocean Roomba. And there it is.
And there
oh
it
no,
is.
miracle.
And it's gonna suck up the oil here, and just like my Roomba, when it finishes in that part of the ocean, it'll go over here, and we'll eat that up.
So there's an example, just by changing the texture, having this nanotexture on the surface, we can make it go from not particularly liking oil to sucking up everything in sight. Okay, so I'll close with just a couple of conclusions. I'll do that by backing up. Well, we'll just speak to them. So a couple of things to think about. Nano has not met its potential yet. It's still pretty early. But like the internet and biotechnology, it will change the world in profound ways, and in cleaning as well. And then just a final note here, we are seeking partners for developing for these various cleaning applications. If anybody has any interest in that, please seek me out. I'll be here till tomorrow morning. And thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Collin.